So there's other progressions we can get to before we get to full standing, because again, standing is going to be your most complex environment because we have to navigate the most amount of gravity. That makes a big aspect of functional training is the navigation of gravity. Now, no one goes to the gym and goes, I'm going to nail out some navigation of gravity today, but it is how we learn to resist and produce force at the same time. It's how we develop fluid motions. It's how we work with balance, being able to keep our center of mass over our base support as we move in direction. So again, standing sounds simple, but it's not easy. So one of the things that we can do to help qualify people if they're ready to get into something like carries is this very simple action doing a march. The reason I like using the march is we're not really adding direction to our movement. We're using the fact that we're in a single leg environment. Because remember, in walking, we're about 60 to 70% of the time in single leg. So if we can't stabilize that single leg action in marching, imagine what happens when we add direction, and then unfortunately a lot of times add a load. So a simple march is basically going to look for my leg to get about parallel to the ground. I don't need to get into too much hip flexion. I'm not crunching down my torso. I'm not trying to set a world record. I can go less than that for people too, so we can build upon the range of motion. Generally what I want to do is be able to hold that for a 2 count. We're not going to hold this for 3 minutes or anything like that. Just to have that, make sure they own that position. One of the benefits in doing this is that when I lift one leg up, the other leg has to drive down. So what I'm learning is how to drive force to the ground to create stability through my body. Now, what we're going to do is go through a couple progressions with this. One is to simply take a band, we're going to add a row to it. So a couple things when we're doing this. Why are we doing a row? We're not trying to really strengthen your upper back. We're trying to take advantage of the fact that your lats work with your core and your glutes to create stability when you're walking. It's called your posterior oblique system. So when Jessica rows in, she's going to hold that tension, then she's going to start to march, okay, very slowly. Now, a couple things here. We want a 90-degree angle with that elbow. Sort of think about your plank. If I take my plank and just bring it down, that's about where I want to be in my row. A lot of people get their hands up too high to their shoulder. So I want that tension first. I want to create that brace. Then I'm going to slowly go into that march. So we're going to try to connect the chains and start to build that foundation to that gait pattern. So we're going to drive in. We're going to hold. So again, shoulders down. And then she's going to slowly. We're going to try to hold for that 2 count. Nice, Jess. So we're going to look for a locked leg on the leg that's still on the ground. And this is a nice way, again, planking, bracing, learning gait patterns. So we're teaching a lot of different qualities in a very simple drill. And relax. For something like this, we can do this for time. 30 seconds, we can work up to a minute. It's a nice way to sort of introduce these qualities because we're going to add complexity over time. So if we don't have this as a foundation, adding on more complex patterns is going to be very difficult to do in a very successful way. So now we're going to add something with a little bit more tension. So when we're going to create a little bit more tension, we get a little bit more of that stability, but we're still going to try and create that chain. So we're going to start to load this a little bit more, but we're still doing this via connection. So again, something that Dr. McGill talks about is that strength is really that ability to create linkage through our chains. It's not just trying to isolate a muscle or create hypertrophy or stress that singular muscle, but to think about the sequencing of muscles, because most injuries happen because of lack of motor control, lack of sort of the organization of the muscles producing the motion. So how do we know if we're doing that? Well, doing more complex drills like this can definitely go a long way. So with the ultimate sandbag, what Jessica's going to do in a moment, she's going to get into what we call our front load position. Front load because we're thinking about front plank. So just like in a front plank, I create tension into the ground to create that brace. What I'm going to do with the ultimate sandbag is try to break it apart. So it's not just her holding the weight. So again, the tool matters here, that the reason we're putting the load here is to get that core tension, but then she's going to brace against it to integrate that lat. So if you let your elbows flare out, which is a very common error here, you're losing your plank. Once she gets in that position, she's set. She's going to go into her march, but now she's going to add a little T-spine rotation to the side that comes up. So we're starting to build that natural gait pattern. Now, be careful, it's just a little T-spine rotation because we're supposed to have mobility in our thoracic spine. We want stability in our lumbar spine. So the goal is not to rotate as far as you can, it's just to give a little rotation. So we want to keep the head forward because your body will follow your eyes. So Jessica, let's clean the weight up. See our elbows are in towards her ribs, they're not too high, they're not out. Once she's set, she's going to go nice and slow. Add a little bit of T-spine rotation. So just a little bit. So I almost joke that you want to see the logo just deviating a little bit from that center. Okay, just keeping it nice and tight. Nice, just last one. So a great drill to do is show that control, add a little bit more multi-planar fact. And the fact that when we walk, we actually create some rotation, right? When we use opposites, we're creating some slight rotation in the body. That projects us forward because we're rotational beings. We're cylinders, right? If you throw, kick, punch, we all create rotation. That's how we create maximal efficiency through our movement. So in a moment, we're going to do our last drill, which is one of my favorites, but it's a very challenging drill. And this will give us a good baseline to see if your clients are prepared to do something more complex like carries. So what we're going to get into now is getting really into the reciprocal motion of the body. It's basically taking that idea of a push-pull. So we know like a push-pull, when we get in cable systems, we're getting a push-pull like this because, again, that's kind of how our body wants to work. Anyone that's been in fighting sports knows that when you create one punch, the next punch almost creates more power. It's the reason that we tend to go back before we go forward in things like swinging, throwing, and other type of rotational drills. So again, it's not about doing a chest exercise. It's not necessarily doing a back exercise. It's more of a core exercise. All right. So what we're going to use is both the lever bell and the band for two different reasons. So the lever bell will help us create a tight grip, and that grip will create shoulder stability and help us tap into that lat. All right. So when we're creating the press, we're trying to get here lat and core, not into chest and shoulder. So it's a great opportunity to teach people how to press correctly too, and correct a lot of shoulder problems. And the wonderful thing about the lever bell is, obviously, the lower we grab, the more demanding it is. So I like it better than a kettlebell bombs up because, let's face it, a kettlebell bombs up, as well intended as it is, doesn't really work well with a lot of clients. So if you need to choke up really high, that's fine. Over time here, even if you do it wrong, it's hard to create a problem in the shoulder and make it uncomfortable. The thing you want to make sure, though, is that you don't lose that 90-degree angle. At the same time, she's going to create a pull with the band, so it's going to create that row in, and basically we're getting into that lat from the other side. So first we're going to do it without a leg movement. She's going to just practice the push-pull. So even if you just want to use this as a core drill, it's a fantastic core drill, and starts to teach this sort of idea that we're a cylinder when we create motion. Once she gains proficiency, then we can add into the leg movement. Now, if people are going to fixate which leg, I don't know if it really matters. So we're just going to pattern one side. Again, trying to create that tight grip on both sides and just have ownership. Now, see how she's getting a lockout on that lever bell? We need a lockout. She stops short of lockout. We're not getting into that lat. We're going to stay into the shoulder, which is what we don't want to have happen. So this is a really fun drill. It's really challenging. We've had a lot of professionals go through this, and they're surprised how hard this is, even though they've been doing things like carries for quite some time. So again, it's getting the idea, how are we qualifying people for more complex exercises and realizing, even though walking sounds so fundamental to what we do, that if you break down the complexity of the movement, there's so much to it, right? In gait, there's probably 6 to 8 phases of gait. And when you think about most exercises, there's not that many moving parts. Even something as complex as a get-up can't even match to what's happening when we're in gait, or even more challenging when we're actually running. So again, these are ways to build a progression so we can stop guessing and feeling more confident that we know when people are ready for these good movement patterns, and focusing on movement patterns and not just exercises.